Hi everyone, Vanessa here, alcoholic. My sobriety date's October 8th, 2017, and I just wanted to touch base, get back on here for a brief moment. As some of you know, I have been struggling with some of my health stuff, and I've been told it'll take about 3 months to get back on track. I'm anemic, and so I've been having to take a lot of supplements and kind of make sure that I'm eating super nutritious foods. And also, I'm just like mindfully imagining all of my blood regenerating because I am so iron deficient and all the other things that go along with it. And so I have been working very diligently on getting back on track. So if you have all your blood in you and it is nutrient dense, make sure to give yourself a little hug today. And if you're not, know that neither am I. And I am also hugging myself just a little bit tighter, especially because it's difficult to almost uh, sustain ourselves spiritually and mentally, emotionally when we are physically off our game, right? Um, and so I've been taking into consideration my physical health a lot more. I have treated my body very terribly over the last couple of years. Not out of, and previous to that, even worse, right? With like really restrictive eating or just unhealthy habits. And then more recently, it's just been more out of neglect. And I'm trying to like reconcile this care for my physical body in a way that belongs to me. And I've never really been able to like make that make sense in my brain because as a woman, so often we're kind of taught that our bodies belong to everyone but ourselves in this way that is very dissociative. It's why there's so many women walking around so dissociated from their bodies because it's like, well, this body is actually just like this avatar that I'm supposed to tout around town and make sure that it's accepting and acceptable for society as a whole. And even though for the most part, like rejected that, it's still very much a part of my subconscious and a part of my operational manual. And so that's just kind of something that I'm always struggling against while also being like, actually, this is my body and I need to make sure I'm taking care of it. And the way that I need to do that, the only way that has really made sense to me is because it is actually conflicting with my ability to do my spiritual practices and to be more spiritually and mentally sound. And so all of these things are connected, of course. And since I've been kind of off kilter there and kind of feeling imbalanced and literally weakened, and I would not in my life, in my day-to-day, ever describe myself as a weak person, not for any connotations of like what that, insinuates, but actually physically weak. Like, um, and I will get to that a little bit more details in that shortly because I do want to also say that um so I'm kind of been, working with my physical health and then emotionally I lost my friend and roommate Olive, who was my Frenchie who I had adopted almost 2 years ago. And, she came to me late in life. She was already 9 years old when I was able to adopt her. And we stayed very close to her original family. And that was very important to me because they had raised her since she was a puppy. And I had sworn off having dogs for at least a year when Olive came to me because I was still grieving in 2022, Coppola, who was my soulmate. If you knew me, you knew Coppola. We went everywhere and anywhere together. He was my soulmate. And he passed away in March of 2022. And then in October of 2022, my other dog, Gladwell, who I had adopted 3 years before he'd passed, and I had rescued him from a shelter that was going to kill him, actually. So he had gotten an extra 3 years, and I knew that I did the best that I could with him. He just got very ill with cancer. And the end was a really traumatic facing of myself with myself because I was trying to keep him alive. And it became so clear that I could not because his cancer had gotten so bad. And so having to put him down, that was the first dog I'd ever have to put down. And it was just an experience I don't wish on anybody, actually. And then I got on, so that was in October of 2022. And then in December of 2022 is when I met and adopted Olive. And so, and she's moved with me. She's traveled across country with me. She's road tripped with me. We've had so many adventures. She is an actually licensed therapy dog as well. So she was very accommodating and super emotionally available for me the last week before she passed when I was struggling immensely with my physical health. I was just weakened to a point that I had not been weakened to in a long time. And I coincidentally, or also had like a follow-up visit with a doctor at that time to kind of go over some more treatments and stuff and kind of getting to the root of what had caused all of this. And I just was crying in the doctor's office because I hadn't felt that bad in like such a long time. I've never actually been like the epitome of health either, and I think a lot about when I was in my active alcoholism, when I would drink. You guys, I would drink to blackouts and be hungover and drunk the whole entire next day. So I was constantly vomiting. When I say I smelled like vomit all the time, nobody ever told me I did, but I'm pretty sure that I did because I was just constantly um I was so sick from drinking that I would drink to not feel sick, but then in the interim, or if I couldn't afford alcohol, then I would be throwing up. I couldn't eat normal foods because I was always so sick. I had gallbladder issues, I had ulcer issues, I had all these issues. So I was constantly feeling ill, and that, not to mention all the anxiety and depression and stuff from my alcoholism. So I was kind of used to operating in that place. And I was still very, pretty successful at my job and doing all these other things, even feeling so sick. And I honestly think I survived out of spite in a lot of my alcoholism. But since I gotten sober and I've gotten more in touch with what my body's actually feeling and actually like, oh, I cannot, that last week there were times when I couldn't even walk all of the entire block. I would just walk like half of it, and she would know to go potty sooner than later because I'd have to turn around because I was so out of breath. And I was so, my heart, there's something about anemia that it just makes your heart beat erratically. Like it was terrible. And so that was pretty rough, especially because I like being outside. We had some nice weather. I'm living in a beautiful part in San Diego and I love to walk around. And, I just wasn't able to do that. And so she was very patient with me, and she wouldn't like, she would love to pull me around. She was not a very good leash dog, but that last week she was incredibly patient with me because I just couldn't physically walk any faster or any longer than I could. And so she was very patient with me, and she would just lay right next to me and kind of comfort me. And I was just like in so much like I don't even it's almost like I feel it sounds really dramatic. And by the way, there are millions of women with anemia every single day. I just feel like I remember even just being younger, whenever I would get sick, I would just get really sick, like in a very weird way. It's always felt to me a little bit more than physical. And my mom would always say, "You're so sensitive." You're so sensitive to all these things. Like I just was constantly like things, I always felt things a little bit differently. It almost seemed like, which never was really reassuring as a child, but now I'm kind of realizing it's just my lot in life. And so, you know, uh, the anemia was just kind of wearing me out. And so, yeah, and I found myself getting really kind of like, I don't know, just impatient, I guess. And I was like, how is this going to take 3 months to feel better? Which 3 months is, a drop. of time in the ocean of my life, right? But it is what it is. And so I remember on Saturday, it was October 26th, I had actually felt a little bit better. And so I woke up, Olive and I got up early, we went on a long walk around our neighborhood. We really enjoyed a longer stroll. I was actually looking for a mailbox. Apparently, there are not any mailboxes, so I needed to drop something off, a package in the mail, and I had to go to the post office. But Olive and I had a really great time just walking around. It was a beautiful morning and it was so nice. We stopped, got a cup of coffee, got a pup cup. And then later that night, I noticed that she was feeling really ill. And it was interesting because she wouldn't lay down. And I was like, I gave her maybe like 30 minutes. And then I tried giving her a treat and she refused the treats. And I was like, okay, something's up. And I had taken her downstairs because I could tell she just wanted to be outside. And so I took her outside. And again, just grateful that I was feeling a little bit better by this time. I don't know if I could have been as attentive to her if I had not felt as well as I did that day, and if I had felt as bad as I had that week. And even some of my neighbors were like, "Is she okay? You guys okay?" I was like, "No, she just threw up twice, and I'm not really sure what's wrong, but I think I'm gonna take her to the vet." And so then I ended up taking her to an emergency vet, and by that time Olive wouldn't walk, and so she wouldn't get out of her bed, and I had carried her in her bed from my car into the vet. And I remember thinking as I was carrying, because she's not a light dog, okay, she's like a 25-pound dog, and me in my anemic state as well, I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do this. I hope I don't drop her. And luckily I just grabbed her bed and I carried her inside. And as I made it through the doors and I put her down on one of the tables there, I was like, how did I just do that? I like the thought literally went, I was like, how did I do that? I haven't been able to walk, half a block, and now I'm like hauling this little chunk of a dog into this vet. And I wasn't out of breath. My heart wasn't beating crazy. I wasn't having heart palpitations. I didn't feel dizzy. And I was like, oh, this must be like the adrenaline that like mothers get when they're lifting cars off of their babies or whatever. You know what I mean? And so I was like, that must have been what that was. And so I take her in there and they do their whole exam thing or whatever. And she's having a lot of trouble breathing. And so they do put her into an oxygen like chamber thing, which basically just looks like glass or plastic covers, right? So I could see her, our cupboards. I could see her, they put her in there. I put her bed in there so she can be comfortable. She's maybe her breathing's a little bit better now. And I'm just kind of staring at her. I don't know what it is about when a dog is not feeling well. I just feel very engaged, just like stare at them, right? Because I just need to, dogs can't speak to us and tell us what's wrong. So you just kind of have to engage with them and be present with them in that moment and see how they're doing. And I could tell she was not very happy. And then when that was all happening, there was a dog that was behind me that died. And so the owners of that dog were just bursting out in tears and wailing. And, it's very sad. It was very traumatic. And I could see the vets trying to resuscitate. It looked like kind of maybe like a lab mix. It was a big dog. And so it was like a very violent um, experience to see them try to resuscitate this dog. And of course, just the sadness of the owners there. And and of course, I'm looking at all of them. I'm seeing in the reflection the whole thing happening and hearing it because it's directly behind me. And then all of us like peeking around my head, like what is happening? What is happening back there? I'm like, don't look, look at me, look at me. And then we did some x-rays, I did an ultrasound, and they found that there was some blood in her stomach. And then the vet went on to explain to me that it's likely that she has a big tumor or multiple tumors that are growing and causing her internal organs to bleed and possibly bleeding into her stomach, which is not a good sign. And that it, it's going to be an aggressive cancer at this point, and at her age, even if we did an operation for 15 or surgery for $15,000, the recovery would be pretty brutal. It's already going to be a high risk because she has trouble breathing, and also her long-term prognosis would not be great. She'd probably have another 30, 60 days. And so hearing that was horrible. You know, the delusional part of myself was like, okay, well, I can find some way to like get $15,000. And then, but realistically, I kept seeing her age in my mind, and I was like, she's 11, she's 11, she's 11. And I was like, okay, she's probably not going to, and it's just a brutal thing. It's such an abnormal thing, I think, to do surgery on a dog, even though God knows I've taken my dogs to get surgeries before. And so I go back, we put her back into and then the vet says, and because I was like, well, can I take her home? Because, you know, at this point, I'm thinking about making arrangements to put her down, but I don't want to do it in the vet office. I'd rather do it at home. And she's like, if we take her home, you know, she's becoming anemic. Her blood is carrying oxygen to her body, but because it is bleeding into her stomach, she's losing blood. It's just internally. And so if we take her out of the oxygen chamber, she's going to have trouble breathing. You're going to lose her a lot faster. And I was like, oh my gosh. And she's going to be struggling during that time. And of course, when she said anemic, my first thing was like, oh, this is my fault. You know, and there's this thing of like, there's just like this weird delusional magical thinking that happens when somebody is dying or in the process of dying or is dead. And it's like, oh, maybe I could have done this thing, or maybe that was the clue of this, or like maybe I should have, if I'd done this, they'd still be alive, or like whatever, you know, and it's all not reality. It's just our brain trying to solve a puzzle. But at that point, I was like, wait, did she just absorb my anemia? And it's like, that's why I felt better today. And that's why she got so sick today. In reality, I think she'd been feeling sick the whole week. I was feeling really sick, but she just waited until I felt a little bit better. And so she was like, okay, I can go now. Um, and so, you know, that was very traumatic. And then the first thing I did was I reached out to her previous owner. By this time it was like 11:30, maybe midnight. And I was like, hey, I'm at the vet. Olive is not doing well. I think we need to put her down. Do you want to be here? You know, and very grateful that her previous owner, Soleil Maria, she came down and um she was there. She was there with Olive. You know, she's been there since she was a puppy, and she was there when she took her last breath. And so it was a very sad experience. It's never fun. It's to put down a dog, and I especially did not want to have to put her down in the vet office like that. But you know, you can't really choose the circumstances a lot of the times. And so, yeah, that was very sad. And so actually right now, Olive is right there. I got her, picked up her ashes, on Thursday, Friday last week. And, I've been, you know, this is a very familiar feeling that I have of like, I always call it like skipping a step. Like, you know, if you're going down the stairs too fast and you like miss a step and now you're just kind of like stumbling down, you're like, oh, you know. And then sometimes you can catch yourself on the next step, or sometimes you're just falling on your ass all the way down. And that's kind of how I really feel about grief, in a lot of ways. And all the ways that I've experienced loss, that's how I feel it. And so when I got home and I just experienced, you know, an empty bed, an empty apartment, my activity level has plummeted over the last week because we really walk with Olive. And even my Fitbit was like, you're getting a lot less exercise, you're moving a lot less. And it's like, yeah, because I've been in bed crying. Like, give me a break. Um, and so, you know, and I'm just kind of having flashbacks to when Coppola and Gladwell died. I was just like, my whole life is just like these caring for these other animals, and for other people in a lot of ways, have always been the axis of my rotation. It is what has centered my life. It is what I revolve around. And I just kind of feel like God has kept continue to try to show me that at some point I need to make myself the center of my own axis, of my own gravitational pull, and really begin to care pour as much care and love into myself as I have into other people, or into other living creatures around me, or into other causes, or into other, things. Because I have, it seems, an endless amount of like love to pour into the external. And I think that I've always struggled to internalize a lot of that. And even though I've made tremendous progress in that over the last year, it still is a process of missing a step, sometimes in the process of returning that love to myself, I'm having to grieve letting go of other survival mechanisms that I am used to clinging to or have clung to in the past that can no longer exist for me if I'm going to continue on this path of loving myself, right? And so, which really leads me to the third kind of thing that's happened. So I've had my health, I've had loss of a dog, my friends, and then now loss of like relationships. I'm kind of, I feel like I've always been heavier on the side of compassion, and sometimes to the detriment of my relationships with people. So mostly to the detriment of my relationship to myself, where I prioritize having compassion for others over my own emotional and spiritual well-being. And I feel like there are steps to this. Uh, there are steps to like, oh, something doesn't really feel in alignment with me all the way, or I didn't like the way that that person really, this isn't necessarily anything to do with being a good or bad person, okay? It's just more what is actually in alignment. What do I want to be surrounded with, If there's somebody who's constantly negative, who's constantly just seeing the bad side of life, who's constantly making problems for themselves, I can tell you I can have compassion for that person and feel for them and love them and also not want to have them near me, right? Um, because one, they're not actually available for the loving that I'm able to provide. And also they're not really willing or capable of providing me with uh, a love that I would find nourishing either, right? And so I feel like a lot of people are stuck in these cycles within themselves where they haven't been able to reconcile their own love within themselves, much like I'm just kind of realizing within myself, right? And so what I see is a lot of people around me kind of spinning their wheels and not really wanting to do the work to get out of that. And in my experience, having been around people like that a lot, I either will regress and join them, but I can't actually continue growing. Like it actually does stunt. It is that cliche of like you are the five people who you are closest to, right? Like my dad would always say, "Tell me who you're with, and I'll tell you who you are." And I kind of the blinders kind of fell, and I got to see people in a very different light, and it's still a very loving light. I don't have any you know any animosity towards anybody. I do wish that I had kind of handled things a little bit differently in some cases, but in some cases, I was able to tell a couple of groups of friends that like, I just need to step away from this friendship for a little bit. I need to work on some things. I love you guys, and I hope to reach out to you when I'm ready to get like a cup of coffee or something. We'll check in and see where we're at. I don't really think it's my responsibility to tell them, well, you need to work on this, you need to work on that. That's not really my responsibility. I feel like if they're happy doing what they're doing, then that's up to them. That I can't really. There's no judgment here. I just know what is and isn't for me, and that is not for me. And so I kind of had to step away from them. And these are people who I've been friends with for the majority of my sobriety, and so it's a little bit painful. And then in, other relationships too, relationships where I do want to be a little bit more vulnerable and sensitive and more intimate and just putting effort and giving time and time. And somebody is saying, I just need one more week. I just need one more day. I'll get back to you. I'll get back to you. And it's like, this clearly isn't a priority. And I prioritize people who I care about. And I want people who care about me to also prioritize me in some way. And so having to let go of this delusion that somebody would change, this delusion that somebody was emotionally available for me, this delusion that something could be more than what it was, and that's a different kind of heartbreak, but it's still a very real heartbreak. And um and the heartbreak is almost twofold because now I can see in a lot of ways where um I think I just kind of waited too long, where there was a part of me where I was like, this, nothing's changing, nothing's changing. And I'm sorry if I'm talking a lot of vagueness. I just want to also, it's not, I don't want to like specifically tell details of intimate relationships like that, but like this, I mean, but just it's not in the grand scheme of things, it is more a reflection of where I am, where it's not so much where other people are or what people are and aren't doing right or whatever. It's just, what do I want? Am I getting it? Can I ask for it? Am I getting it? No? Okay, then I need to go. I do think communication is a big part of this, right? Like once we are clear with ourselves what we want, can we communicate that and feel safe to somebody? And can they hold it for us? And can they say, this is actually also something that I want? And if it's not, then it's not, there's no point kind of beating around the bush, basically. So, yeah, having to process that relationships in different ways, which is, by the way, a very different way than how I have processed relationships in the past. But I did have some, still toxic behaviors that I wasn't really proud of, and that in time I will eventually make amends for. But it's right now, it's like noted. I could have handled that differently. And then the last thing is that the election, of course, well, I'm recording this on the 6th, so the election was last night. And I don't have words for a political system that I don't really believe in. It sounds dismissive. It sounds like I'm opting out of the human experience, but the political systems in this country are not efficient. They are not effective. They do not currently represent country that should be geared towards evolving and progressing. And so regardless of the political avatar that you wanted to vote for or that you voted for or that we are currently saying has power over us, it's irrelevant. And it's irrelevant in the way that I mean that the power that we have within ourselves and with each other will always be more effective. It will always be more relevant in our local communities and how we treat each other than we can ever believe has any impacts in the way that the media is trying to tell us that it does, right? They only want to tell us the very bad news. That's all the news is. We know that. A lot of people are aware of that. But I guess what I'm trying to say, again, without sounding, because we do know the policies are getting put in place we do know that the way that we put somebody on a throne is how the followers of that throne, enthroned person, it almost gives them more license to act or to believe or to do whatever they want to in accordance to the person that they've put on that throne, right? But uh, the reality is that when you take that away, if we all lost the internet today, if we all lost TV today, the only people we could look around and work with are the people directly in our vicinity, right? So do you know your neighbors? Are you nice to them, regardless of who they voted for? Um, this is why I try to like talk to people and try to get to know them a little bit. Like I just want to know who lives around me. I want to know who's in this neighborhood. I want to know that if, I go missing someday, that somebody would realize I was gone, It would realize that, if that person, my neighbor who lives on the corner, if he's not on the corner for more than a couple of days, I'm like, where did he go? Like, I want to make sure that he knows that he's thought of. And these are the people who really in a crisis, if there was a tsunami, these are the people I'm going to have to rely on to help me, not somebody who's across the country and doesn't have a raft to throw at me. I have to deal with what I got, and that's the people directly around me. And sometimes it's your family, sometimes it's your friends, sometimes it's your significant other, sometimes it's your coworkers. Sometimes, I work from home, so my neighborhood is my community, and I try to get to know the people around me because of that. So I think that that's always going to be a more powerful connection. And also beginning to know people in this more personal way is just a really good way to change people's conceptions of what they feel about politics. So, and not in any outwardly way, but in a way of like, do we really need this? I don't know. I'm clearly not a political person because I just see it as such a construct that isn't real, that will eventually be dismantled, because it isn't relevant. And I also refuse to give my power over to it. I'm not going to have a bad day because of it, but I do know that it impacts and it puts fear into people around me. And that is actually, I think, what I'm a little bit concerned about is more of the fear that is instilled in people, because it's difficult to build connection and to connect with people when people are in fear. And so that's kind of what I've been thinking about. So that's all the bad news. So my health, my dog dying, ending relationships, end of romantic relationships, end of democracy. I don't know. This idea, this facade of politics being effective at all. The good news is that I have been spending time with family. I'm very grateful for them. Just acknowledging them and loving them. And I think they have really been part of my healing process as far as my relationships as well. For so long, and I'll get into this in another video, and the dynamic, especially as I'm working with Miss James Finley and mystical sobriety and the timeline in our inventory. It's a completely new way of doing it, and I am like enlightened by it. And so the story that we tell ourselves about our relationships, and I was able to see so clearly some patterns that have shown up, and some patterns that I've been able to let go. And I think that this is why I've been able to express my needs more clearly and more honestly. And it's still a grieving process, because it's like, oh, I had to let go of the girl who was a people pleaser, who let people treat her like a doormat, who let people take her for granted, who let people kind of walk all over her, and the girl who always wanted to be picked. Like, we're not doing that anymore. And so letting go of that, even though I'm grateful to be letting go of it, is also still just like, oh, but now I'm left with this new person and I don't know how to be her all the way yet. So but part of that healing that came from my family is just this love that I feel whenever I am with them, even though I almost didn't talk to them for an entire year. We reconciled in this way. I've been able to state my piece. They've been able to acknowledge and hear it. And what it doesn't change is, um, actually, it changed everything. It changed the way that I operate in this world, being able to, and I think that part of that is them just being able to hear me, and that's not an easy thing to do. Is to really hear what someone's telling you. And so they have, and it's kind of, this loop that I've been playing out in all of my relationships to try to be heard, to try to be seen, to try to be cared for. It's been closed now. And I've closed that loop with the source of where that pain came from. And I got to do that with my family. And I just don't feel anything but love when I see them. And it's just love and love and love and love and love, 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 love. And it's just like being able to walk into a room of love, and it doesn't even matter what we're talking about, what we're doing, what we're not doing, what we're saying. It's just that the presence is there, and um I that's just a proof of God for me. And also the acknowledgement that that proof is everywhere all the time, anytime that we want to acknowledge it. And some days it's easier to acknowledge than others. And so that's kind of the presence that I'm working in mystical sobriety to continue to stay engaged in, is that forever present love. And I'm grateful that I get to see it reflected to me and in my parents. I get to reflect that within myself and in the community. And yeah, I don't know. So I feel like there was something else I was going to talk about, but I feel like this is now just a little too long. So I'm going to cut this off now. I will get back to regularly scheduled videos here pretty soon. I'm just kind of working a couple more things out in my brain. Oh, that is what I wanted to talk about. I am finally, in the spirit of NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month, writing. And I am writing, this is kind of more of I don't want to say it's a memoir because I'm not really anybody to be writing a memoir, but it's kind of just like this little capsule of my time in San Diego comedy scene. And I'm really excited about it. I wrote out an outline for it, and the words are flowing, and I'm having a really good time kind of looking through photos and videos and just like everything that I got to like glean from the experience of being in the San Diego comedy scene, just as a fan, because I never was a stand-up comedian, and that was kind of the thing. I'm not a stand-up comic. I don't ever want to be. And I have a lot of time enjoying, well, at that time, watching comedy. And I got to see parts of me that were being nourished by that, and the parts of me that were being restricted and neglected by it. And so that has all been another process. And in writing it, it has been another way for me to digest that information and that experience. And I hope that it is interesting to other people, and that I give the San Diego comedy scene the respect that it deserves, while also shining some lights on my own experience. And so I hope that this was helpful to everybody. I literally said nothing, but that was probably helpful. Maybe just hearing me talk through these things it might be helpful to some. I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying at this point. I need to get back to work. And I love you, and thank you for still being here. It was nice to see. I have comments to reply to. So I will get to those. I love you. Please subscribe if you haven't yet. I promise my other videos will be a little bit more cohesive than this one. And I just wanted to jump on and say hi. So, all right. Thank you, everybody. I love you. Bye.